Hello, everyone. Here's another reading from my new book, Postcards to the Future. This time I'm talking about the thorny question of prediction, and I'm going to give you some of my own hesitations about prediction, as well as the fascinating story of how I went to a laundrette in Bath and ended up eventually, as a result, as an astrologer. Here we go. Prediction and a personal story. The question of whether it's possible to foretell the future is one which has preoccupied humans ever since we evolved into self-conscious beings and began to conceptualize past, present, and future, now thought to be around 80,000 years ago. Prediction has been around for a long time. Economists do it, weather forecasters do it, politicians do it, physicists do it, futurologists do it. Most of the foregoing predictors direct scorn and derision at the people who have done it for longer than anyone else, astrologers. There is several thousand years worth of recorded empirical evidence, much of it stored on clay tablets as yet undeciphered in the basements of museums across the world, demonstrating that the movements of the planets in our solar system correlate with particular shifts, quote, in the affairs of men, brackets, Shakespeare's term, not mine, end of brackets. This empirical observation continues into the present day in the consulting rooms of astrologers across the world. For example, a number of politicians and economists consult astrologers regularly. They are mostly unwilling to admit it, though we astrologers know who they are. What we can and cannot do. Both astrologers and astronomers, via planetary observation, can look at and directly plot the unfolding pattern of energies through space-time. After that, astrologers step into a realm different from that of observation of the external material planetary world. By looking at a section of any points or moments of the past, present, or future via a horoscope, they can examine the essence of that moment in terms of its meaning and speculate with moderate accuracy about what some of the branches manifesting in the wider world or in individuals' lives may be. What they cannot do is see exactly and with consistency how those branches are going to manifest. Historically, our track record on hindsight is much better than it is on foresight. There have been some spectacularly accurate predictions made by astrologers in the public realm over the centuries. A famous one was made by Luc Gauricus in 1555, to the effect that King Henry II of France, then aged 37, was in danger of death in his 42nd year by a head injury incurred in single combat in an enclosed space. And 5 years later, Henry duly died of a lance splinter which entered his eyes and pierced his brain. There have also been some spectacular failures, e.g., to predict that the Munich Agreement of 1938 would lead to World War II. A new model slowly emerging. We do much better at describing the essence of a pattern, but identifying the exact branches is much more hit and miss. Personally, this cheers me, since it appears to suggest a creative balance between fate and free will in the universe. Chaos theory in contemporary physics also has strong parallels with the astrological paradigm. Both the language of astrology and the language of quantum physics tells us that not everything is pinned down. Indeed, a view and a model are slowly emerging despite considerable resistance from the die-hard defenders of reductionism, which can demonstrate convincingly that the lenses of astrology and quantum physics are focusing on the same underlying all-encompassing reality with a capital R. The perspectives offered by contemporary writers, astrologers, depth psychologists, and scientists, such as Richard Tarnas, Liz Green, the late Charles Harvey, Stanislav Grof, Brian Swim, Rupert Sheldrake, and others, including recent books by astrologers Armand Dias, Kieron LeGrice, and Bernadette Brady, have been of inestimable value to me. I urge any readers who are keen to expand their own perspectives to explore their work. Consciousness holds the key. My view, based on my personal experiences and those of clients and students for nearly 40 years, as well as extensive reading and study, is that the key dimension in determining how a particular planetary pattern will play out in a person's life is the level of consciousness at which they are operating at the time the inevitable challenges of life come their way. Most astrologers have had the humbling experience of looking at the horoscope of a client, which looks so difficult that the impending consultation feels very stressful. But upon encountering the client, they meet someone who has faced, dealt with, and grown through hard experiences that would have flattened a less aware person. We can never predict the level of awareness of a client we have never met, although we can have a good idea that, for example, Mars conjunct Saturn, conjunct Pluto, square the moon is going to be no walk in the park. I am personally very hesitant about both the accuracy and the wisdom of predicting at all, especially for individuals, in any more than a describing the core and speculating about the branches kind of way. Predicting that a specific branch will manifest may well close down possibilities rather than opening them up, which also takes us into the realm of self-fulfilling prophecy. For example, when Uranus was about to cross my Pisces descendant in 2005, beginning its 7 or so years traverse of my 7th house, I became concerned about what this might mean for my marriage. The rather problematic implications of Uranus' impact on the relationship realm that practicing astrologers see every day in their students' and clients' lives as well as their own worried me. However, a profound, totally unexpected spiritual experience on my husband's part linked both our spiritual journeys into walking the same path at the same time. This has had a supportive, deepening effect on our marriage, and not one I could possibly have envisaged before Uranus crossed my descendant. My personal prediction story and the laundrette. Having just made what I hope is a coherent case for specific prediction being a practice of dubious merit and only intermittent accuracy, here is my own striking experience of being on the receiving end of a specific prediction I never asked for at a time when I was a typical astrology dismisser. I considered that astrology was rubbish without ever having taken the trouble to study it. Bath, Somerset, England, June 1974. I was engrossed in the Sunday evening chore of doing washing in the laundrette on the London Road near where I lived. It was a liminal time in my life. After having resigned from a lecturing job, I was preparing to leave Bath. A return to the Outer Hebrides was imminent. A strange-looking couple came in, accompanied by a little girl of about 5 years old. The woman was tall, slender, with long dark hair, a very scruffy Afghan coat, and a distinct look of share. The man was smaller than she, slight, with unruly greying hair and a mischievous face. I carried on with my laundry. The little girl was chatty. Soon she was putting money into the dryer for me. I was telling her stories and we had become great friends. I met her parents. They were both artists and astrologers. Brackets, note for below, Seamus and Gloria are fictitious names. End of brackets. Not the kind to do that stuff you see in the paper, said Seamus scornfully, having noted the fleeting look of disdain which crossed my face at the mention of the word astrology. Seamus said, we are the real thing. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in their cramped basement kitchen, drinking tea and being charmed by Seamus. His combination of erudition, intensity, conviction, humour, and blarney was irresistible. "Do you know your birth time?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "Why are you interested in that?" "Because I am going to draw up your horoscope," he replied. Whether I wanted such a procedure embarked upon or not was of no consequence to him. So slain was I by his charm that I didn't offer any resistance. As I watched, interested in spite of myself, Gloria and Seamus assembled a hefty tome, a slim pamphlet, blank sheets of paper, a calculator, a fountain pen, and a newly sharpened pencil. The tome was an ephemeris, they informed me, a list of the planet's placements every day at noon for the whole of the 20th century. Seamus took a blank sheet, carefully drawing a circle freehand in its centre. He then proceeded with great rapidity and fluency to insert squiggles, planets, and numbers around the inner edge of the circle. He then drew lines within a smaller inner circle, aspects or links between the planets at the time you were born. He and Gloria then sat back, gazing with silent preoccupation of the image they had created. Seamus, looking at his drawing and only briefly at me, gave an astonishingly accurate description of my father's complex, domineering, idiosyncratic, and wayward character. That was bad enough, not least because it reminded me of certain aspects of myself. Worse was to follow. "You're a person rich with creative gifts," he said, "but you need to know and face more clearly the most difficult facets of your own nature. It's time to do that since you're approaching 30 and your Saturn return." With that, he forensically summed up those parts of myself which I knew were there, but had tried very hard to avoid facing or admitting to anyone. A very common and human failing that Saturn transits expose and challenge on a cyclic basis throughout our lives. I was feeling by this time as though I'd been hit on the side of the head with a sock full of sand. Then, with true rhetorical skill, he delivered the punchline. "You tell me you're a total skeptic now," he said, "but stop fooling yourself. You have a deeply spiritual nature, which needs to find meaning and connection with something greater than yourself. Until you manage that, you will be driven by the same restlessness that still drives your father, and you will not find inner peace." There was a long pause. "And I can see from where the planets will be in about 7 years' time that the big picture is going to come seriously calling at your door. In your early 30s, you're going to end up either doing what I'm doing now or something very like it." I was utterly shocked. I had known those people for less than an hour, most of which had been spent walking back from the laundrette to their flat and organizing cups of tea. They knew nothing about me of any significance. How could they produce such specific and accurate material from marks on a piece of paper? I couldn't even begin to get my head around the prediction. It seemed beyond absurd. Slowly, I carried my laundry home. There was no way I could find to make sense of the experience I had just had. There was no file inside my head into which it could fit. 7 years later. 7 years later, a friend gave me a copy of Alan Oken's Complete Astrology. I have no idea why, but had enough respect for that friend and his opinions to begin reading. About 3 pages in, I had the strangest sensation of someone pulling me into the book saying, "Come here, you're for me." I still have this battered old copy with my signature on it, February 1981. And my transits at the time? The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Libra, exactly conjunct natal 2nd house Neptune, and exactly sextile natal 11th house Mercury, my ruling planet. Uranus crossing the natal IC, Neptune beginning a long opposition to the natal 10th house Uranus-Mars conjunction and trine to the natal 12th house Sun, Pluto trine natal Uranus and sextile natal Sun, North Node conjunct natal Mercury. A summons, pretty much. In February 1981, that prediction, which I had never quite forgotten, and the feeling of fascination, compulsion, and exhilaration, which Alan Oaken's book triggered in me, came together in a way that has profoundly shaped the whole of my subsequent life. Concluding thoughts. It's good for us all, especially people like me with 7 planets and fixed signs, to get jolted out of our positions now and then by experiences that don't fit our frame of reference. Hopefully, the jolt will have the effect of breaking down some of our old defenses and letting new experience and new knowledge enter our lives. I reinterpreted Seamus' prediction in the light of my own subsequent astrological knowledge. It was pretty obvious by then how he had got there, as was the timing of it. I still think about the encounter with him, his child and partner over 40 years later. Did his prediction at some subliminal level point my life in a direction that it would not otherwise have gone? I will never know. But I do know, as a result of our encounter, that whatever my reservations are about the wisdom of offering such specific outcomes to people, astrologers sometimes have the power to do just that. Whether they should do it is another issue altogether. And here's a picture of Seamus's laundrette horoscope. You'll find this story and 59 other essays of varied scope in this book, Postcards to the Future. I hope you enjoy it when you acquire it. Thank you.